What if I told you that 9 cars once existed that were so outrageously beautiful, so dangerously fast, and so impossibly rare that the men who built them broke their own companies just to make them real? This isn't an exaggeration. This is the story of the 1980s, a decade when European engineers stopped asking, "Should we build this?" and started asking, "How far can we push this before it kills someone?" Wedge-shaped bodies that looked like they were carved by lightning. Engines borrowed straight from Formula One and stuffed into road-legal missiles. Designers who ignored safety boards, ignored budgets, and ignored common sense, all in the name of pure, unfiltered beauty. Some of these cars nearly bankrupted the companies that made them. Some were banned from certain roads. Some killed their own test drivers. And yet, every single one of them is now worth more than a house, sometimes more than an entire street of houses. So if you love wild design, screaming engines, and the kind of automotive insanity that could only have happened in the 1980s, stay with me until the very end, because car number 1 on this list is so extreme, so borderline illegal in its design philosophy, that when you hear its story, you will understand why some cars simply should not have existed, and yet, thank God they did. Before we dive in, if you feel that rush of adrenaline just from the thumbnail, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel keep bringing you these hidden automotive legends. And subscribe if you want to keep riding through the golden decades of car design with me. Alright, let's go back to the 1980s because what you are about to hear will make modern hypercars look boring by comparison. Lamborghini Countach LP500 Quattrovalvole, 1985. Picture this, it's the early 1980s. And Lamborghini, a company that had already flirted with bankruptcy more than once, decides the answer to its problems is to build the most aggressive looking car the world has ever seen. Not aggressive as in fast, aggressive as in it looks like it wants to hurt you. The Countach wasn't designed, it was sculpted by Marcello Gandini, a man who apparently believed cars should look like weapons rather than vehicles. Scissor doors that opened straight up into the sky. A wedge-shaped nose so low it could barely clear a speed bump, and those enormous rear haunches with air intakes carved into the sides like battle scars. By 1985, Lamborghini pushed the design even further with the Quattrovalvole version, cramming a 5.2-liter V12 engine with 4 valves per cylinder into that impossibly low body, producing 455 horsepower, an obscene number for the era. And here's the twist, almost nobody knows. To fit that massive engine, Lamborghini had to mount it backwards, with the gearbox facing forward through the cabin, meaning the driver's elbow practically brushed against the transmission tunnel while shifting gears at over 170 miles an hour. This wasn't engineering, this was madness disguised as luxury. Visibility out the back was so poor that owners often had to open the door and stick their head out just to reverse the car. And yet nobody complained, because when you're behind the wheel of a Countach, you don't want to see behind you, you only want to look forward. In 1985, a new Countach QV cost around $99,000, which today would be well over $280,000 adjusted for inflation. But that number means nothing compared to what collectors pay now, with pristine examples crossing auction blocks for well past $500,000. Owning one wasn't just owning a car, it was owning the single most photographed poster on every teenage boy's bedroom wall across 3 continents. Tell me honestly, did you have this exact car taped above your bed as a kid? Drop it in the comments, because I guarantee half of you did. But if you think the Countach was the peak of 1980s insanity, wait until you hear what Ferrari built specifically to humiliate it. Ferrari Testarossa 1984. Ferrari looked at the Countach's crazy wedge design and decided, we can do wide, dramatic, and beautiful without looking like we're trying to start a fight. The result was the Testarossa, and the name itself, meaning redhead in Italian, was a tribute to the red painted cam covers on Ferrari's legendary racing engines of the past. But the real story of this car is in its silhouette. Those side strakes, the ones that look like gills running from the door all the way to the rear haunches, weren't just decoration. They were functional, feeding air into side-mounted radiators that had been moved from the front of the car to the sides specifically to keep the cabin cooler and improve weight distribution. This was a car whose entire body was reshaped around airflow science, yet it somehow ended up being one of the most seductive silhouettes ever put on four wheels. At nearly 6.5 feet wide, the Testarossa was so broad that Ferrari genuinely worried it wouldn't fit through certain European city streets, and in some cases, it didn't. Under that low, flat rear end sat a 4.9-liter flat 12 engine screaming out 390 horsepower, capable of pushing the car past 180 miles an hour, all wrapped in a body so wide and low that police in Miami reportedly had to special order wider parking spaces just to accommodate the wave of Testarossas flooding into the city, thanks to a certain television show that made this car a global icon overnight. In 1984, this car cost roughly $92,000, translating to more than $260,000 today. But here's what most people don't know. Ferrari deliberately restricted early production, creating artificial scarcity that turned this into one of the most desired status symbols of the decade, with waiting lists stretching years long even for people who had the cash sitting ready. This wasn't a car you bought. This was a car you earned a spot in line for. Now, if the Countach was aggression and the Testarossa was seduction, our next car was pure, unfiltered obsession, and it nearly bankrupted the most legendary racing brand on earth to build it. Ferrari 288 GTO 1984. This is where things get genuinely wild, because this wasn't built to be beautiful first. It was built to win a racing category so brutal it was eventually banned entirely from motorsport. Group B rally and race regulations demanded road legal homologation specials, meaning manufacturers had to build actual street versions of their race cars. And Ferrari's answer was a twin turbocharged V8 monster wrapped in a body that somehow still looked elegant despite hiding an engine capable of shredding tires in every gear. Underneath that deceptively classic Ferrari silhouette sat a 2.8-liter twin turbo V8 producing 400 horsepower, an engine so highly strung that Ferrari engineers had to develop entirely new turbo technology just to make it drivable on public roads without the car trying to kill its own driver. Only 272 units were ever built, each one hand-assembled, each one intended purely for a racing series that was cancelled before this car ever got to compete, meaning the 288 GTO became a legend not because it dominated a race, but because it was simply too extreme for the world it was built for. In 1984, it cost around $85,000, close to $240,000 in today's money, but original owners who held on to theirs are now sitting on cars worth well over $3 million at auction. Some of the most explosive value growth of any car on this entire list. Can you imagine buying a car for $85,000 and having it become worth more than a private jet 40 years later? That's the story of the 288 GTO, a car so overbuilt for a race that never happened, it became a myth instead. And speaking of cars built for a battle that became legendary, our next entry took everything you just heard and multiplied the insanity by 10. Porsche 959 1986. If the Ferrari 288 GTO was extreme, the Porsche 959 was genuinely from the future, and I mean that literally, because this car introduced technology that wouldn't become mainstream in the industry for another 2 decades. All-wheel drive systems that could distribute power between front and rear wheels in real time. Adjustable ride height. Tire pressure monitoring built directly into the dashboard. This is 1986 we're talking about, and Porsche essentially built a computer-controlled supercar before most people even owned a home computer. Underneath its smooth aerodynamic body, a shape so advanced it achieved a drag coefficient that modern manufacturers still study today, sat a twin turbocharged flat-six engine producing 444 horsepower, capable of catapulting this car to a top speed of 197 miles an hour, making it, at the time, the fastest street-legal production car on the entire planet. Bill Gates himself famously bought one and had to wait over a decade to legally import it into the United States because it didn't meet crash safety regulations, and it sat in storage the entire time. That's how ahead of its time this machine was. Only 337 units were ever produced, each one costing around $225,000 in 1986, which translates to well over $600,000 today. But original examples now trade hands for over $1 million, some pushing toward $2 million for the rarest configurations. This wasn't just a supercar. This was Porsche's declaration that the future had already arrived, decades early, wrapped in one of the most quietly beautiful shapes of the entire decade. Now, before we continue, I want to know, out of these 4 so far, Which one would you choose if price genuinely didn't matter? Comment below, because the answers so far on this channel always surprise me, and trust me, the next car on this list is going to make that decision even harder. Because this next one wasn't even meant to exist as a road car at all. Lancia Delta OS 4 Stradale, 1985. This is, without question, one of the most insane engineering stories of the entire decade, because this car had both a supercharger and a turbocharger stacked together on the same tiny 4-cylinder engine, purely to eliminate turbo lag while still producing monstrous power at every single RPM. Lancia built this as a homologation special for Group B rally racing, arguably the most dangerous motorsport category ever sanctioned. A category so lethal it was eventually banned entirely after a string of catastrophic accidents involving spectators. The road-going Stradale version you're looking at now was Lancia's way of legally allowing this rally weapon to exist on public streets. And underneath its compact, boxy, utterly aggressive fiberglass body sat a 1.8-liter engine producing 250 horsepower in road trim, though the actual rally versions were unofficially rumored to push well past 500 horsepower once teams finished tuning them beyond factory specification. Only about 200 road legal units were ever built, making this one of the rarest cars on this entire countdown. And originally, these sold for approximately $70,000, or roughly $190,000 today, adjusted for inflation. But here's the twist that makes this car so tragic and legendary at once. Group B racing was banned the same year this car was homologated, meaning the Delta S4 barely got to compete before the entire category it was built for ceased to exist. Today, surviving examples sell for well over $1 million, not because of what this car achieved, but because of what it represented, the absolute, final, most dangerous, most extreme point that motorsport engineering was ever allowed to reach before the world said enough. We are halfway through this list, and if you're still with me, you already know the next 4 cars are going to be even more insane, because we're now entering territory of cars so rare that most car enthusiasts have never even seen one in person, let alone in photographs. Aston Martin Zagato, 1986. British engineering meets Italian design house, and the result is a car so controversial when it was first revealed that Aston Martin dealers reportedly had customers signing deposit checks before they had even seen a finished prototype, purely based on rendered sketches. Zagato, the legendary Italian coach builder known for bold, unconventional shapes, took Aston Martin's classic V8 platform and reshaped it into something almost alien, with a low, flat, double-bubble roofline and a front end so aggressively short that it looked like the entire nose had been chopped off with a blade. This wasn't subtle British elegance anymore. This was British muscle wearing an Italian suit tailored 2 sizes too tight, and it worked spectacularly. Underneath that hood sat a hand-built 5.3-liter V8 engine producing 432 horsepower, an enormous number for a British Grand Tourer of this era, allowing this car to hit speeds beyond 185 miles an hour despite weighing over 1,700 kilograms. Only 52 units of the coupe were ever produced, each one built essentially by hand, in a partnership between 2 countries and completely different design philosophies. In 1986, this car cost an astonishing $130,000, more than most Ferraris of the same year, translating to well over $360,000 today. But the real story is in the waiting list, because customers were paying full price deposits for a car they had only seen in sketches, trusting purely in the Aston Martin badge and Zagato's reputation for building rolling art. Today, surviving examples are among the most sought-after British collector cars in the world, regularly crossing auction blocks well north of $800,000. Alfa Romeo SZ, nicknamed Il Mostro, meaning the monster, 1989. And I promise you, once you hear the story behind this car's design, you will understand exactly why that nickname stuck. Alfa Romeo wanted to build something completely different from anything in their lineup, and they handed the project to Zagato once again, but this time with almost no design restrictions whatsoever. The result looked like nothing else on the road: a squat, angular, almost brutalist body with a nose that dipped down aggressively and a rear end that seemed to be sliced flat, like someone had taken a normal sports car and hit it with an industrial press. It was polarizing the moment it was unveiled, with some critics calling it hideous and others calling it a masterpiece. And honestly, both were right, because this car was never meant to be conventionally pretty. It was meant to be unforgettable, and 40 years later, people are still talking about it, which tells you everything about who actually won that argument. Underneath its fiberglass composite body sat a naturally aspirated 3.0-liter V6 engine, producing 207 horsepower, paired with a chassis so sharply tuned that automotive journalists of the era called it one of the best-handling front-engine cars ever built, capable of cornering forces that rivaled dedicated race cars. Only 1036 units were ever produced, each one an individually numbered piece of automotive controversy. Originally priced around $75,000, or close to $165,000 today. What's fascinating is that decades later, this car has completed one of the most remarkable reputation reversals in automotive history. Once mocked for its looks, it is now celebrated as one of the boldest design statements of the entire decade, with values climbing steadily as collectors realize that true beauty sometimes needs 40 years and a change in perspective to be properly appreciated. Would you have called this car beautiful in 1989? Or does it only make sense now? Let me know in the comments, because this is genuinely one of the most debated designs on this entire list. BMW Moan, produced from 1978 through 1981, but so influential, it defined the entire supercar aesthetic of the decade that followed. Here's a story that sounds almost impossible. BMW, a company known for elegant sedans and refined coupes, decided they wanted to build a mid-engine supercar to compete directly with Ferrari and Lamborghini, so they partnered with Lamborghini itself to help develop the chassis. Yes, you heard that correctly. Lamborghini helped build a car for BMW, until Lamborghini's own financial troubles forced them to abandon the project halfway through, leaving BMW to finish the job themselves through Italian coach builder Giugiaro's design house. The result was a wedge-shaped, low-slung silhouette that looked utterly unlike anything BMW had ever produced before or since, with a sharp nose, pop-up headlights, and a rear end that tapered dramatically into a cut-off tail. A design language so influential that its DNA can still be traced in supercar silhouettes decades later. Underneath that radical body sat a naturally aspirated 3.5-liter inline-six engine producing 273 horsepower, mounted in the middle of the car for perfect weight distribution, an engineering approach BMW had never attempted at this scale before. Only 456 units were ever built across the entire production run, making this one of the rarest BMWs ever created. Originally priced around $113,000, translating to well over $400,000 today. And this was specifically because production delays and the Lamborghini partnership collapse drove costs far beyond BMW's original projections. Today, pristine examples of the Moan regularly sell for over $600,000, and it remains the only mid-engine supercar BMW has ever put into production, a single, brilliant, expensive mistake that turned into one of the most respected collector cars to come out of Germany. We are almost at the end of this list, but I promise you, the final car is going to leave you speechless, because it's a car so obscure, so wildly ambitious, that most people watching this video right now have genuinely never heard its name before. And once you hear the story, you'll understand why it deserves the very top spot. But before that, one more absolute icon of automotive excess. Isdera Imperator 108, 1984. This is where the story gets genuinely strange, because Isdera wasn't Ferrari, wasn't Porsche, wasn't even a company most people have ever heard of. It was a tiny, independent German manufacturer founded by a former Mercedes-Benz engineer named Eberhard Schultz, who essentially decided, if the big manufacturers won't build my dream car, I'll build it myself, by hand, in extremely limited numbers. And what a dream it was. The Imperator featured a periscope-style rear-view mirror mounted on the roof, exactly like something out of a fighter jet, because the rear visibility from the cabin was so poor that a traditional mirror was completely useless. Gull-wing doors that opened upward like something from a science fiction film, and a body so low and wide that this car looked more like a concept vehicle from a future that never actually arrived than something you could genuinely purchase and drive to the grocery store. Underneath that wild body sat a Mercedes-Benz sourced 5.0-liter V8 engine, in some versions boosted further to produce up to 400 horsepower, allowing this obscure hand-built machine to compete directly with cars from manufacturers 100 times its size. Fewer than 30 units of this car were ever produced across its entire production run, making it one of the rarest and most obscure supercars of the entire 1980s, originally priced around $140,000 or roughly $390,000 today, an almost unbelievable price for a car built by essentially one dedicated engineer and his small team. Today, when one of these rare machines appears at auction, and it happens perhaps once every few years, collectors who understand its story fight over it, because owning an Isdera isn't just owning a car, it's owning proof that one person's obsession, with enough talent and stubbornness, could genuinely go toe-to-toe with the biggest names in the industry. And now, the final car on this list, and I saved this one for last because its story is genuinely one of the most tragic and beautiful in automotive history. Ferrari 40, 1987. Enzo Ferrari's final approval before his death, and arguably the most raw, uncompromising supercar ever built by any manufacturer at any point in history. This wasn't built to be comfortable. This wasn't built to be practical. Enzo Ferrari reportedly told his engineers he wanted the fastest, lightest, most direct car they had ever created, with absolutely no compromises for luxury whatsoever. And the result was a car with no carpets, no door handles in the traditional sense, just pull cords, no radio, no power steering, and windows that didn't even roll down. They simply slid open manually. This was a car stripped down to its absolute essence, built purely to go as fast as physically possible, and underneath that dramatic, sharply angled body with its enormous rear wing sat a twin turbocharged 2.9-liter V8 engine producing 471 horsepower, making the 40 the first production car in history to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier, a milestone that captured global headlines and cemented this car's legendary status instantly. Only 1311 units were ever produced, and in 1987, it cost approximately $400,000, an enormous sum at the time, translating to well over $1 million today adjusted for inflation. But pristine examples now regularly sell for $2 to $3 million at major auctions, some of the most consistent value growth of any car from this entire decade. This was the last car personally approved by Enzo Ferrari himself before he passed away in 1988. Meaning the 40 stands as his final message to the automotive world. And what a message it was. A car with absolutely nothing extra, nothing soft, nothing compromised. Just pure, screaming, terrifying speed, wrapped in one of the most iconic shapes ever designed. Owning an 40 isn't just owning a supercar, it's owning the literal final word of the man who created the most legendary racing brand on the planet. So now, I want to know, out of all 9 of these incredible machines, which one absolutely stole your heart? Was it the terrifying aggression of the Countach, the futuristic genius of the Porsche 959, the tragic beauty of the banned Lancia Delta S4, or the raw, uncompromising fury of Enzo Ferrari's final creation, the 40? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because I read every single one of them. And honestly, your stories about spotting these cars as a kid or dreaming about them from a poster on your wall are exactly what keeps this channel alive. If today's video gave you chills, do me a favor and hit that like button before you go. It genuinely helps more people discover these incredible stories. And if you loved the pure insanity of the 1980s, you cannot miss our video covering the most dangerous race cars ever banned from motorsport, because what you'll see in that video makes even the Group B cars on this list look tame by comparison. I'll see you there, because some cars aren't just machines. They're proof that once, for one glorious decade, beauty had absolutely no limits.